My job security had collapsed, my relationship had collapsed, and my friendship circle had collapsed. Nothing seemed certain. So that was a dark time. Part of my journey, which informs everything else I've got involved in, is that question, what is our relationship to that greater force, that greater power? What is it all about? And to me, love and life-giving energy are the same thing, that there is this greater force. And what we are here to do is co-create. So that landed me hugely in debt, £60,000 in debt, which with a young family was like terrifying at the time. But for me, there's 3 pillars for any entrepreneur's success. Knowledge dispels fear. Yeah. When you know you can do something, you are less afraid of it. And how do we avoid the dark dog depressions of life? Because I know those very well. It's what we all crave. We need someone to go, I am just here with you. I still love you even though you're struggling. This is the message of all the great religions. This is sort of the message of Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey, the ultimate realization. Most of us are living with that condition. When I get there, I can be happy, and it never happens. Because the reality is happiness can only ever be experienced in this moment now. Find where your energy lifts. Find what stirs you. Going over there looks promising. Let's try it. Not because when I get there I'll be happy, because this is a path I want to walk. Let's enjoy the journey, because I believe our richest experiences of life are the degree to which we can share love.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
I am truly honoured to be joined by a business leadership development coach and author and founder of the Business Jet Engine, Mr. Martin Riley himself. How are you, sir?
Great to be here. It's taken 2 years, Sam.
Yeah, it's taken 2 years. It was so funny, isn't it? We've been we talk, obviously communicate on LinkedIn a few times, and we talk about, and we mentioned it today as well, at an event, sitting there at the Grand together, and unfortunately the table around us, we was in our own little zone, right? And you come away, had an amazing conversation. And I messaged you, I've got to get you on the podcast, and yeah, unfortunately it's taken a little while, but we're here. And delighted to be so. So, mate, listen, thanks for taking your time to join me. We're gonna, as always, we're just gonna start at the beginning. I want to know a little bit about Martin Riley growing up, a little bit about your childhood, and something about that that's shaped who sits in front of me today.
Okay, well, there are quite a few bits to that. So I think where we need to start is my dad was an architect planner, and we moved to Jamaica when I was about 3.5 years old. And there were a couple of things that came out of that. One is we traveled quite a lot for the kind of background I was from. We traveled in the late 60s when it was very glamorous, very exciting. And I think that kind of exposed me to a few things. One was that there were lots of different worlds. I went to Mexico, Bermuda, Jamaica, New England, places most kids of my age and my background hadn't been to. So I saw there's kind of all these rich environments. But also in Jamaica, I was exposed early to sort of superhero comics. So there's a magical sort of fantasy world I almost got fixated by or exposed to. So that was one thing. But then when we moved back, and I would have been about 7.5 by then, my parents got divorced. Now, they did it incredibly well. They were very kind. They never showed any animosity to us. I think my dad was very hurt by it. But somewhere around my early teens, from that experience, my mother started talking to me about the reasons that it hadn't worked. And she was now with my stepfather, who it worked wonderfully with. So I don't know if you know the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where he grows up with the contrast. I almost had relationship dad, not very good at relationships dad. And it got me asking the question, what makes relationships work? So one, there's this kind of superhero theme was there where I want to rescue the world. The other was this starting to ask what makes relationships work and what causes them to fail. And then I went to a boarding school, which is a charity school. So a lot of people from very diverse backgrounds, which kind of taught me one thing, which was tolerance. You had to really be tolerant of others and the diversity that was there. But the other thing, and one of your previous guests also went to the same school, the pupils took on a huge leadership role at the top of the third year because they were junior boarding houses, and then at the top of the school because they were senior boarding houses. And then the teachers were one step removed from that. So from a very early age, I noticed that particularly sort of in the third year, some who were given that responsibility of being school prefects or monitors, some were naturally brilliant at it, some were awful, some easily got people to do what they required, others had to do it by force, others completely failed. And it was a prestigious role which I wanted to step into. So it got me asking what allows leadership to work, and when does leadership fail? So you can already start to see some of the things forming that I've always been on a quest around. And then whilst I was at boarding school, another thing happened. And until that point, and I'm not going to get religious on anybody, but I'd never been very comfortable in church. But there was something about it I was curious about, but I never liked of organised religion. I just didn't feel good, but there were bits I did enjoy about it. And somehow I got into fishing around that time. At the school, there was a beautiful lake, and I kind of liked going down to the lake with my fishing rod, trying to catch fish. I didn't know what I was doing. I was learning everything from a ladybird book on fishing. So I really, was not very advanced. And in the local town, in the fishing shop, there was this beautiful spinner. Now, I knew nothing about what type of fish you needed to catch with it or anything, but I loved this spinner. I saved up my pocket money and I bought it. And I went fishing. And I was using the spinner and found out, well, firstly, I was in a lake with lily pads, and spinners and lakes with lily pads is not a good idea. But after after a while, I cast back and my fishing line got caught in the tree. And I tugged and pulled and did everything I could to get my spinner back because it cost me a lot of pocket money and it wasn't coming out. It was absolutely stuck. So I knelt down and I prayed. And I said a prayer, please God, if you just let me have my spinner back, I will go to church for the rest of my life every Sunday. And I hardly stood up and I hardly touched the rod and the whole lot fell out of the tree.
Wow.
And I literally exclaimed, oh shoot, not in those exact words. And I just kind of said to whatever was there, I can't actually go to church every Sunday, because I was just not comfortable. But I knew that was okay. But what I did know was we had unfinished business. That there's some greater force, some greater energy that was at work. And I had to figure out what my relationship was to that. And I knew that deal was okay.
How old was you then?
Probably about 13. Around the time a lot of friends were getting confirmed. And I wasn't, because I didn't feel comfortable taking vows I knew I wasn't going to keep.
And so where do you sit on religion? Like, have you, over the course of your life, have you gone to church? Do you follow a religion, or?
I've been to both church because my family goes to church, not always consistently, but when I've visited and they're going, I've been. The school I was at, part of it was we went to the chapel regularly. That was just part of the drill. In a junior house, you went twice a week. In a senior house, you went once a week. And then I married someone who was Jewish, so I went to their shul, their synagogue, when they did. in support. So I've been involved in religion, and when I've travelled, there's a number of things I sort of go to the various, whatever the religious places are to sort of sit and absorb and try and understand their religion. So I've looked into it a lot, but it's not for me about religion, it's about faith. What's that force? What is the greater power? So I've kind of, particularly looked at Buddhism and various things. So part of my journey, which informs everything else I've got involved in, is that question: what is our relationship to that greater force, that greater power? What is it all about?
I love that. Because there is, like, I've not been to church. I did a couple of times when I was younger, and I've got the twins now, and they often ask, "Oh, do you believe in God?" And I find that quite a difficult question to answer sometimes, because I don't necessarily think I believe in one God. I don't practice religion. I don't follow a specific religion. But how you sort of described it is that I do believe that there is maybe something bigger than us as human beings, and when I remember when Lucy was in hospital when I was first born, I did go to the chapel there, and I sat there and prayed, and I was stuck. Get emotional when I think about it. But I remember going back to that part and asking for help. I don't believe in God. I've never been to church on a regular basis, but I asked someone or something for help, and whether the miracle that happened was that she was absolutely fine and she came out of hospital was because I'd asked for help, or because the doctors were amazing there, and maybe a combination of all of them things. But I think when we're desperate, there's something peaceful in the fact that there maybe is something bigger than us, maybe.
Yeah, the life force.
The life force.
Yeah, as you know, I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan, and this is kind of later on in my journey and story when I came across him. Yeah. But he was the mentor to George Lucas, who created Star Wars. Yeah. And he had studied all the great myths and legends and put them together in what he called a monomyth. He was a mythologist. And it told us of the story of man or womankind and the journey we go through in life. Which is probably for later on in this, because it's later on in my story, so it'd be quite nice to leave. But I love his view, his take on it from Star Wars, that there's a force, and for me that's how I tend to think of it most. That there is a life-giving, life-creating, and to me love and life-giving energy are the same thing. That there is this greater force, and what we are here to do is co-create. You said, was it because you asked for help, or was it the ability of the surgeons, or was it both? We can pray to God, but we've got to row to the shore at the same time. We are here to co-create. We are here to interplay with a web of consciousness of which we are a fractal. We are a part of it. And that's, to me, one of the three main life journeys that comes from the hero's journey. We can get on to what the other two are after, maybe later on.
I do want to delve into. I'm keen to just around that sort of area. You mentioned about relationships. Keen to tap into, like you say, from a young age, I guess you're experiencing your parents split up and then being inquisitive about relationships. What even at that young age, what did you sort of take on board? What did you learn about relationships? What was your take on it?
I think I particularly saw the differences, and with what my mum explained and helped me understand, was that kindness, appreciation, that the more you criticize someone, the more you take a chunk out of them, the more you sort of make someone doubt themselves, the more it's hard to create love between you. So I think at that age I sort of understood that, but the rest of it I was still pretty confused. There was a lot I wasn't getting right, a lot I didn't understand, and particularly I was hooked on the big myth that we're all hooked into, which is someone else. I need someone else to make me happy.
That's really interesting, actually, because there's so much about that. Look how many apps there are out there to try and create this thing where we're going to find someone because that's going to make you. I've been with my wife now, 27 years, 28 years, and I think we've had lots of ups and downs in that time, as I'm sure you can imagine. But I've always been of the thought process that you're in a relationship because that person makes your life better. You're not reliant on them to make it better, if you know what I mean. So for me, very much along the lines, I guess, of if I'm happy on my own and I'm happy with who I am as a person, I'm happy, then that's okay. This person that's come into this world of mine is going to enhance it and makes that better. That's the essence, I guess, of what...
I would absolutely agree, and I tend to think a lot in theories and concepts, and let me say now, every concept, every theory I kind of put out is only until I found a better one. So I subscribe to them till I find a better theory, but I love the concept that there are 3 levels of relationship maturity, relational maturity, and the first is dependency, and we tend to start there because that's how we were as babies and children. We need someone to come and change things for us, and so our happiness, we rely on someone to come and make us happy, and that's where we get in very dependent and codependent relationships that are often a bit of a mess. Then what a lot of people do is, I've had enough of that, because often they turn toxic, and all my happiness is dependent on someone else who doesn't treat me the way in the end I realise I deserve, so I'll be independent and I'm totally okay on my own. But then we in the end, I mean, I think the ultimate blessing is to receive someone's love. So we all kind of crave it, and that comes back to the hero's journey and stuff we'll get onto later. But we crave love. We do want love in our life. So in the end, many of us get lured back into then wanting a relationship and thinking, wouldn't it be lovely? And we very easily slip back into that dependency, that codependency. It becomes a mess again. We go, never doing that, I'll be independent. But the ultimate place is to be interdependent, where, as you say, we are totally okay on our own with ourselves, but we recognize everything that person brings to us is a bonus. It is a gift. And therefore we can let go of all the little details we want to change and the way we want to train them to treat us differently, because we've changed our whole mindset around it. And you know, a lot of my journey has been learning how to do that, because it's very easy to say these things, but how to let that happen in your life without getting caught up in trying to change people. That's a whole different game. It's a whole different story.
Because there is something like I listen to. There's a really good podcast I listen to regularly with Jay Shetty, and he obviously talks a lot about relationships, and he states as well, like you can't fundamentally, we can't change someone, and we shouldn't want to change it. Like if you're changing that person to be in a relationship with you, then it's the wrong relationship, right?
Yeah.
I guess the again back to, I guess, what trying to touch on what you were saying about just trying to find out who we are as ourselves, and that person coming in is going to benefit that relationship, as opposed to coming in and moulding them into someone we think that we want them to be.
And don't we all want to be loved for who we are? We all in a relationship want to be able to completely just be ourselves. Mind, body, spirit, emotion. We want to be able to fully express ourselves. Isn't that what we're here to do? Part of our own life force is to be fully expressed. And therefore we're happiest when we're in a relationship with someone who allows us that. But equally, that's what they're hoping for too. So for me, the ideal is we're in a relationship where both people can fully be themselves, which is actually remarkably hard to achieve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to delve as well up, just touching still, I guess, on your journey and childhood and some of the things that I guess you're learning along the way there. What was your, as a child, what was your dreams or ambitions? What did you want to do?
Well, that, I think, came out of the superhero. It started there with the superhero magazines. I wanted to save the world and save people, and ultimately, be loved by the heroines. Typical, teenage boy dream.
Cape on. Yeah.
Absolutely. But also then I wasn't especially brilliant at anything, but I was reasonably good at lots of things, and particularly art, science. I was okay, but not good enough to really excel in either, and I loved making things. And I came across product design, and I thought that's the career for me, because you kind of blend all of those, and I'm quite good at going from big picture to small picture and being logical but also sort of sensitive and artistic. But brilliant at none of those. So a good generalist was to be a designer. So from quite an early age, I kind of thought that's what I'm talking about sort of 14, where we had to make what was then O-level choices. So I sort of chose design and knew what I wanted to do was go off and be this. And I followed that path. So my view was that, because around again sort of 13, 14, I'd read Lord of the Rings and realised that they weren't just sort of superheroes, but there were magical tools, swords, weapons, rings, amulets. And I loved the idea because I was good at making things. Well, maybe I can make magical things that kind of, save the world, change the outcome, even if I'm not maybe the bravest warrior. So I loved the idea of design. You could make tools, you could make products that changed lives, help people live a better life through the tools around them. So I loved that idea. So that I went off to design, to art college. And had a first career in product design, sort of chasing that path.
Yeah, okay. And then what? Because I'm keen. Part of your journey and something just we touched on before as well, and something you spoke about. And I guess where you've got to, where you help businesses now with the business jet engine and as a business coach. But because I often talk about, I guess, challenges that we face in our lives and careers, and you mentioned about a time with different ventures that you went on and didn't work out. Talk to me a little. Can you share some of those journeys? And I guess there's one I know you mentioned you got a huge amount of debt, and just to talk around those challenges that you face, and I guess what you've learned from them and how you've taken it on.
Sure. So in my product design career, I worked for myself as a freelancer a number of times. And when I just left college, actually with a friend from college, we started our own design consultancy. But after a little while, I realised actually I still had a huge amount to learn, and I would learn it faster by joining an established consultancy in London rather than being our own little company in Manchester. And from there, I got hooked on, around sort of the early 90s, I got hooked on personal development whilst I was still being a product designer. And I loved the idea that you could actually change your own life, or others could change their life through self-awareness, through becoming more aware of the psychology, that whole terrain. I got absolutely hooked on it. Did Tony Robbins courses in America and just soaked up everything I could, read everything I could find. And because I got hooked and I was being exposed to a lot of these people, a lot of the information was them standing on stage delivering words, or it was words in a book, or I was driving my car listening to audio cassettes. To me, this was all words. Now, I'm a designer. I want pictures. I want diagrams, and I want tools. I want this in other forms. And what I was also struggling with, a lot of them, I felt there's a lot of information dumping. They were giving fabulous idea, but as a designer, I'm going, what's the build order? What do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? I want to see this or as a map so I can know where I'm at and what's next. I want to be able to plot my path through all this great content. So it was like a big jumble in my brain, and I started trying to map things out and realized I had, with my design background, a sort of talent for taking a lot of information and being able to put it in a logical order and sequence to decode it. That led to hooking up with a couple of people and deciding what we really wanted to do was help kids with personal development through football. And we came up with a product called Mind Zone, which was personal development through football. So it's using a lot of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So it's a set of cards that they could read before a game to help them shift their mindset to play better. And it did work. We went to various trade shows, and we had a foosball table. And people would come up and go, what's this all about? We'll go, it's to help you play better football. Play me. And I go, read that, play me again, and they would play better, having applied the techniques. And I go, well, that is what it's all about. But even though I was good at product development, I didn't know enough about business. We didn't understand the marketing fully. We didn't understand about procurement fully. We bought far too much stock, thinking, well, actually, to make our numbers, we need to buy all of this stock to sell these in a season and we'll be in profit, rather than actually we have to make a loss to test the product on a launch by a small number that won't give us our numbers, but proves the principle, and then we'll buy the right numbers. So that landed me hugely in debt, £60,000 in debt, which with a young family was like terrifying at the time. So that was a very, very painful experience to have thought I knew what I was doing. And I was very much of the mindset, that personal development mindset, believe it, it will happen. You know, if you want it enough, if you believe it enough, you'll manifest the outcome. And that's why I often say attitude isn't everything. People say it is. And yes, it kind of is a foundation, but for me, there's 3 pillars for any entrepreneur's success. Yes, there's absolutely mindset and attitude. If you don't have that, you're going to struggle. But you have to develop competence in your field. You have to get good at the thing you're meant to be good at and understand the terrain, the map. You can't go into the wilderness and survive just on attitude. You've got to learn some bushcraft.
Yeah.
And the third is relationships. You have to build a network of experts and supporters around you. Every great entrepreneur has those 3 things in place, or build it as they go.
That's such great advice. I completely agree. I do want to just tap in, like, there'll be a lot of listeners, and you know, I've been there as well, and I think, like, people, when talk to me about your mindset at that point. You're in that debt, you've lost that money. What gets you out of that? How did you, what from a mindset point of view, I guess, what dragged you out of that? What was your next turn, and how did you come through that period?
Well, I think very early in my design career, I had a really unfortunate event, which is I'd had the consultancy with my friend, and then I'd come down to London and got a job. And until then, I'd kind of been a golden boy. It was my nickname at college. I was golden boy. I'd won a design competition and been to Japan and been in the Sony studio because of it. And I'd had a good career, start to my career. Then I had my first job, and it just wasn't working out. And I was sacked, which was a complete shock. The truth is, I'd actually handed my notice in a month before, and they said, no, we'll work this out. You know, we can make this work, Martin. What they really did was use the time to get a replacement, and then just before my 30 days was up, they sacked me. But I knew I was leaving anyway. I could see they were making no effort. I'd been round looking for a job, and actually, the very next morning, one of the companies I'd seen that was a big name, Fitch at the time, called me up and said, actually, are you free to freelancce? And I said, funnily, yes. Not I've just been sacked, but yes, here I am. And that day I was in their studio freelancing. And that led to more freelance work. I had other people in design who said, yeah, we've got a freelance job. So I fell into freelancing and found whatever happened, I could find a way to look after me. And that sort of learning from that bad experience was actually incredibly useful to find I can always look after me. I never felt trapped in a job per se. So that was when it all went kind of pear-shaped with MindZone, I still had that feeling I can look after me. I can find ways to sell my design skills, but in a slightly different way, not back in product design as such, but there were people who needed what I was offering now. And I went and spoke to people and got enough paid work that then led to my next full-time job.
Because do you think that's what, I guess, so many people potentially feel trapped within their jobs? How many people do you hear, like, oh, I hate my job, or you go in, and there's so many people. Is it that you had something in the background, you go, that fear of failure, I guess, right? So we talk about fear of failure, and that's what stops people a lot of the time from going into that. If you've got a skill set that you sort of know that actually, what's my worst case scenario, that this doesn't work out, I've got that to fall back on. Because there's always an option generally, isn't there?
Always, yeah. And you're so right. Fear is nearly always what stops us. And there's a lovely phrase which is knowledge dispels fear.
Yeah, I love that.
When you know you can do something, you are less afraid of it. So I was lucky that I'd had this experience early on when it didn't really matter too much. Worst case, I could have moved home to my parents back then when I was first sacked. I didn't want to and I didn't need to. but that mindset was with me. So yes, I think there always is that option. Or it's a bit like there are people who have never travelled on their own, or people who have never really left the county, because there's that fear of the unknown. But actually, when you just stretch the boundaries bit by bit, you find it's okay. So I can understand that for some it is a huge leap, and they do feel trapped. But to me, ultimately, the answer to all of this is faith. Faith in ourselves and our abilities to be resourceful. And most people faced with uncertainty or the most horrific situations, most people find a way through. And one of the keys is to ask for help if you don't know what to do. But there's nearly always a next step. And for me, the simplest thing is always to ask, if I don't know what to do, what's the simplest, smallest step I can take towards getting out of this? And to take that, and then the next step becomes clear. So just keep reducing steps till you know what to do. It's a bit like a boat in the fog. You slow right down, but go, let's just nudge forward. Don't just be drifting with the tide. You've got to have that little bit of forward movement.
Because there is that element, isn't it? But especially if you're in a hole, I guess, like, you know, we sometimes get there.
Oh,
whether
don't
that
we?
be
Yes.
financially.
Been there enough times, yeah.
And that's the, and you look and you know, you look at that hole and you go, oh, just put some plasters over that, and then we'll carry on over here, and we'll deal with that. Actually, a couple of things you just mentioned. One, that the hole sometimes can look like a huge mountain that we've got to climb. So you just bury your head and think, oh, I'm not going to ever be able to get to the top of that mountain. So you just keep paddling away there. And the other thing, the key, I guess, something I struggle with a little bit, but asking for help, such a big thing in life, right?
Yeah, and even more so, I think, for men, we haven't been brought up with the belief it's okay to ask for help. I believe we've been brought up with what I call the myth of the lone hero. You look at all the action movies, going back to John Wayne, to James Bond, to Indiana Jones, to Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise, Vin Diesel. They all work alone. They always see the solution and they won't share the plan, that we're off, and often the heroine kind of goes, no, I'm coming too, and oh, if you must, if I must tolerate you. But we have that myth of the lone hero, that he can do everything. And I think we feel ashamed that we can't. But that's not the reality. Like I say, the three qualities of any hugely successful person when you truly look, the third is the network. There's that wonderful documentary with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's surrounded by amazing people that he absolutely cherishes and values and realizes what they brought to it. And he has that wonderful, I don't know if you've seen the documentary.
I haven't yet, no, it's on my list.
So worthwhile, yeah. And by the end, you kind of see this amazing story. First, he dominates bodybuilding for over 10 years, which is exceptional. Then he becomes one of the top grossing action movie stars, which is exceptional. And then he goes on and becomes a governor of California, which is exceptional, all three in their own right. But at the very end, he's saying something to the effect of, anyone who says I'm a self-made man, that is so wrong. Yeah, I love that. It's all the people around me that helped me get there. And he is so grateful and respectful of everything they've done that has helped him succeed. And yes, so I think men are very reluctant, especially, but we all are, reluctant to ask for help. And going back to that hole, it's especially difficult when we feel depressed, because depression is the emotion that I can't win, and it's designed to debilitate us, to stop and reflect, because normally we get depressed when we keep trying something that isn't working. And it's designed to stop us getting killed. If we go and face a tiger and we know we're going to lose, we get depressed. I can't beat this tiger. I better stop, because next time it's going to kill me. So when we get depressed, we kind of get in that, I better not do anything. We get debilitated by it. And long-term depression, I can never win. Then we really close down and just feel in that hole and can't get out, because there's no energy to get out, because we don't know what to do. And in that hole, that's when it's absolutely hardest.
Have you suffered with depression in your time?
Yeah. And I think that's part of my life experiences. I've had some incredible experiences and some incredible highs all through my life, like starting with Jamaica and some of the experiences there where I was flying on jet craft or going on hydrofoils or Just seeing things I knew others hadn't at quite an early age, which it wasn't about being better, but it was just this was an amazing world. And other times feeling very stuck, very depressed, very low, very lonely. So yes, I know those holes too. I've got this contrast, and part of that rich dad, poor dad, or what makes relationship works or leadership is how do we have more of that fully alive, amazing magic of life, and how do we avoid the dark dog depressions of life? Because I know those very well as well.
I mean, could you share some of those times, I guess, with us, or what led to that? Was it business? Was it personal? What was those things that got you there? And what, I guess, again, back to that thing of from a mindset point of view, because I've been as well, and I talk on here often about, me and you are both, I would say, optimistic people. Yeah. Every time I see you, similar to me, hopefully we've got smiles on our faces, okay, and we both go out and we've got that positive energy around us, and I believe that's who I am. Yeah. My authentic self is this, okay. I guess if I share from my point of view, what I struggled with at that point when I was really down, and I've been in some dark places, was I found it hard to ask for help because this was the persona of me. My persona was positive and optimistic and smiling, Sam. Everything's all right. Happy-go-lucky chap. I didn't want to be seen as that person that was, I'm having a really shit time at the moment and I'm a bit down, and when someone's ringing me, I'm the one going, yeah, no, I'm not in a good place. I didn't want to be that person. So I withdrew from people. I'm a people person. I withdrew from people. People ringing me, mates who I've known for years, I just wouldn't talk to. I get one of the things. Why do we maybe do that? Have you looked in that? And then, and like I say, maybe if you're able to share some of the times what took you to that point.
Well, yes, we absolutely do that, and I've been there. And as I say, I think the reason we do close off is it's the shame we should be able to cope. And we don't want people to see we can't. And it's confessing, I'm struggling right now. And because we feel so awful, we don't want to reach out and show that. And often we don't know what we need. Or we think people are going to come and tell us what we should do. And that makes it worse. When someone is depressed, the last thing you should be doing is saying, why don't you just? Because they've probably thought of it, they've probably tried, but they are exhausted trying to do something that isn't working. What people who are depressed actually need is someone just to listen and go, I'm here with you whilst you go through this. Let me just share the space and go, I still going to make me well up just talking about this, because it's what we all crave. We need someone to go, I am just here with you. I still love you even though you're struggling. But most of us don't know how to just share the space without trying to help and give advice. But that help and advice makes it worse. Do you kind of see how that works? Really because we're going, I've tried that, and I feel even more ashamed because I tried and I can't do it. It's one step too big for me. But when you're not there, it's an easy step. When you're struggling, that's a huge step. It's an overwhelming step. And so we go, I can't talk to anyone because no one's just able to sit with me and be with me till I am ready to move.
I love that. I think that's such a powerful and important message. I think I heard Simon Sinek actually said something along those lines where it was, because as especially as men, I guess we're fixers. We go on and fix something. So
absolutely. You
come to me with a problem. I'm going to fix this for you. What can I do to fix it? Whereas actually, you don't need me to fix it. I think he said something almost identical what you've said. Something like, just come and sit. I want to sit. I'm going to sit in the mud with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to just come and sit with you and just be here. I'm not going to fix it. I'm just going to be here with you. And I think that's such a the narrative out there, I guess, is that we're fixers and we're going to go and do that. Just, I guess, listening to people and anyone listening, if you are struggling and you want to reach out, the people that are there to support, bear that in mind, I guess, is a key message, isn't it? Just to
and maybe just need to jump in there because I know gender is a big issue at the moment.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about men, what I probably ought to distinguish is I'm really talking about masculine energy, because both all blends of gender have masculine energy and feminine energy, I believe, and there's an interplay, and mind, body, spirit, emotion. What's our interplay of masculine and feminine energy? And for me, it's the masculine energy in any of us that is driven by mission, accomplishment, and achievement. And the feminine energy in any of us tends to be driven by connection and relationship. And the feminine is much better at sharing, at being in relationship. And that's why, going back to sort of men and women and stereotypes and just being aware of gender differences and so on. So I know this is a tricky ground, so I want to try and be respectful of it, but I don't always have the right language. So if I get the language wrong, people please forgive me. But so often in middle age, when people hit crises, women will go and talk to their friends. Men won't. Or the masculine in us won't. The feminine in us will. But depending where your proportions are, and that's why those with more masculine energy, I think, struggle more, because they will not open up, because they base their own view of themselves and their success on what I can achieve. Have I achieved the mission? I missed the point. So much of life in the end, actually, and I think the whole purpose of life is about relationships, but that's jumping to the end.
No.
So shall I go back to your question about
please do.
Some of the downsides. So I never talk about this stuff, but probably my first real down experience was to do with my first sort of puppy love, my first love, who was a neighbour who I absolutely adored, and she adored me. And I was around that age, I was kind of maturing and sort of turning into a more aware teenager. And we was just very good friends. We spent a lot of time hanging out, and there was a kind of a love between us. And I was just reaching that age where I thought, actually, I want this to be more than just friends. And was very confident that was going to happen. I came back from boarding school, and she was with another guy. And that broke my heart at that age. She was with the tennis champion from the local school. And they would hang out all summer together, and I went through a miserable summer watching this in front of my eyes with this girl that I'd adored. So that was kind of my first little taste of depression, because I didn't know what to do with this. Then I think the next major experience was probably around that time I lost my job. I broke up with a girlfriend who I thought was absolutely devoted, and it was a bit of a shock and a surprise when that happened. And at the same time, I was going to buy a house with a friend that I shared a flat with, and we were sort of working towards this, and then he came back and announced, actually, I'm going to buy a house with a couple of other friends, not you. And it just felt like my job security had collapsed, my relationship had collapsed, and my friendship circle had collapsed. Nothing seemed certain. So that was a dark time, and it probably took me a couple of years to pull out of that, till kind of it felt like I got life back on track.
What going back to that stage, what over that couple of year period, what of those small steps did you take, I guess, to get yourself out of that? How did you come out the other side?
Well, I probably went into manic overdrive back then. Trying to get another girlfriend, trying to get another job, trying to find someone else to buy a flat with. And all of those worked out in the end. But I probably went in, there was a combination of depression. But at the time, I still had enough willpower and life energy that I was still probably going crazy, trying to fix them all at the same time whilst feeling awful, which is, anyone in business will tell you neediness is client repellent. When you come from desperation, it doesn't help you, it works against you. But I think I would just kind of went into that perfectionist driver's obsessiveness in trying to fix each one of those until they came good. But that wasn't a healthy way to do it.
Sure. And you mentioned have you?
But what that did do is there was I'd never especially doubted myself particularly. I think I've been very lucky. A lot had gone very smoothly for me. And that really shook me, that everything I took for granted went the opposite way.
And you did that yourself? Did you start and you doubted yourself?
Hugely. And that was a big part of the depression. And
it's self-belief is a great thing, right? and we all need it. But to start a business, to do anything in life, really, we've got to believe in ourselves at first. But when we're, especially as entrepreneurs, and I relate this to business, but this is the same in life, in business in general. Life is a struggle, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
We're going to get punched in the face a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess the key is how we react to those things, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the trick, or however we look at it. But in business, in life in general, it's how we react to a situation, is how we respond to that, whether that be resilience, whether you pick yourself back up and you go again. And it all comes down to that self-belief and that self-doubt. They're always going to be pulling against each other, right?
They are. And what I've found, again, jumping to the end of this almost, is I have found the more I have faith in myself, that can be amplified and made so much easier when I also have faith that there is a bigger force I am working with, I'm co-creating with. Because in the end, who's got more willpower? Me or the creative energy of the universe? Who's going to win? So why not tap into something greater than us if we can? Which isn't easy for some people because they have no connection to it yet. But and again, not getting religious, but most religions have some great sayings that unfortunately over time have been abused by those in power to try and manipulate and control us. But, to quote the Bible, seek and ye shall find. When you start looking and opening to the possibility, you'll start to see more possibility for it, more evidence of it. That's been my experience. As I remained curious after that fishing rod event, I've had increasing exposure to incidences that I struggle to explain any other way other than there's a greater force. Things have happened that just make no sense otherwise.
Give me an example.
Okay. Again, going through a difficult time at a later, more mature stage in my life when I was more open to the idea that there is a force or a spirit. And I'd been gripped by an anxiety I couldn't explain. I didn't quite know what was going on. It was a number of factors. And I was talking with a friend of mine who was very spiritual. And they said, your guardian angel is here, which, you can be very skeptical of. And I've been very skeptical of a lot of things. I'm not someone who just willingly goes, oh, yeah, there's angels all around. And even then I say so with great caution. But they said, your guardian angel is here and saying you need to learn to talk to them more frequently. Here's a book, here's some exercises, go and do this. And I was just feeling awful and I did not know why. And I did the meditation and there were some breathing exercises to do with it. And it was a bit like I was struck by lightning. First in my throat, and I had like an explosion of energy that was both beautiful and painful at the same time because there was a release. Then there was a similar one in my heart, and then there was a similar one in my stomach. Now, I've done all sorts of energy work before where I've connected with my energy or other energies. This was nothing like it. This was 1,000 times more powerful than anything I've ever experienced. And the clarity and peace I then had for days afterwards, I've never had a peace like it. Now, I can't explain that experience in any other way than at the right moment, at the right time, when I was open and curious and needed that. I was given that because I'd asked. And I just find that hard to explain. Because all the electric sockets were where they should be in the room. I did not put my fingers in anything, and I was not on drugs.
And was that point in your life? Was that quite a big turning point for you? Would you say?
That was the point at which I was prepared to say, okay, there's lots of things I can go. They were coincidence. That one I do not have any idea how to explain otherwise.
Wow.
Because it was so overwhelming. Because for me to generate that energy myself, I wouldn't know how. Whereas there've been some energies where I kind of, breathe them and create them, sort of finding light inside myself I can do, but that was of a different level.
This is Geo. Geo runs a scarf company. Geo doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Geo is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Geo prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Geo do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go Giraffe app, Geo can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Geo can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals, or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go Giraffe.
You said there about you got clarity then. In what sense? What was clear for you then? Your next stage of your life, or what happened at that point?
Well, again, it's sort of jumping to the end conclusion. We are always looking for things from outside to fulfill us. Success, relationships, toys, drugs. We try and feed ourselves to feel okay. And the thing we crave most is love, which is the life-giving energy. But this is the message of all the great religions. This is sort of the message of Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey. The ultimate realization is we are love. We are that force. We are a fractal of that energy. We are made of it. We come from it. We go back to it. When we are love, nothing's missing. The rest is just choice. We're no longer trapped anywhere. Even death loses its fear because we just return to that energy which is serene, that is powerful. And when we live from that space, when our relationship, when the person does something that isn't our preference, it doesn't matter.
Well, I guess, yeah. I know we mentioned, I think when we had that talk, we mentioned about Charlie Maxey and the book. I fell in love with this book about, and and one of the quotes in that is, "I've realised why we are here, to love and be loved."
Yeah.
And I think when you accept that into your heart, into your mind, and you realise that, and you come at everything from a place of love, it seems to make a lot of things better, seems to make a lot of things clearer. Joy, happiness, and all of those emotions can come from a place of love, right?
Yeah. In fact, I think everything changes when you come from there. And I think we're only able to receive love to the degree to which we can love ourselves. And for me, this is one of the ultimate journeys we need to be on. Is we all know we need to love ourselves, but most people don't know how to actually love ourselves. So the reason I think we struggle with that is, on one side, we are capable of immense brutality. As a species, we are the most brutal, violent, bloody killers on the planet. And that is in our DNA. And we have that capacity to be nasty, to be unpleasant, to be evil. We all also have the capacity to be the most superconscious, loving creatures on the planet. Both can show up. And we feel when we aren't coming from that place, we shame ourselves. We condemn ourselves. This is almost like the human experience that does all of this funky stuff, that's driven by wounds. The not okay wound drives all our crazy behavior. So when we come from there, we tend not to be okay, and we make it someone else's fault. When I get angry, I was taught that if I got angry, that was bad. So I don't like being bad, because when I'm bad, I'm not loved. So you know what? It's your fault. You made me angry. You shouldn't have done that. That made me angry. That upset me. You need to change. So now I've made someone else not okay. And they don't want that. So what they do is go, well, actually, the reason I did that is because you did this. Suddenly I've got a drama. I'm actually losing love. I'm getting the opposite I want. So when I go, actually, it's in my DNA to be human, and within that is the capacity to be one of the most brutal, violent killers on the planet, I got a bit angry. That's okay. Let myself off the hook. It's human to be imperfect, to do some funky shit.
Yeah.
And when I let myself off the hook, because I know that's my stuff, it's coming from my wound, my not okay wound, I let them off the hook too, because we're just the same. We're different, but we're driven by the same wounds and the same needs. And then I recognize I also have this capacity. Why don't I come from here too? I'm not just human, I'm a being, a spiritual being. So when I can embrace both sides of myself with love, my dual nature, and just go, look, I'm okay. And I can be this and I can be this, and both are fine. Then I can love you too for being as messed up and as beautiful. And that's okay too.
That is that's so powerful, because I think you're right. I think self-love is a difficult thing to achieve, because I think there's a constant narrative that we've got to search and find happiness and joy.
Yeah.
And yet, with that, we don't acknowledge the other emotions, the sadness and anger, and those, because like you said, they're in one camp over here, and they're in the next camp over here, and I should always be in this camp. And if I'm not in this camp, then it's getting back to that. When you're feeling depressed or down, you get drawn to these things, but you shame yourself on them, I guess, like you sort of mentioned. You shame yourself on those feelings because I should be over here.
Yeah.
And how do we then, as a society, how do we change that narrative? What do we do to allow people to accept that this is okay to feel like this?
Yeah. So there's two parts to emotions. Emotions are simply a signal, an alert that something has happened that has significance to us. The problem is some of those alerts are based on things we couldn't handle as a child, but still have a power over us, but we can deal with them perfectly well as an adult. For example, if I was little and I wasn't loved by my mother or father, I would feel hugely vulnerable when they either were cross with me, because that was overwhelming and scary, or they kind of withdrew their love, and I felt I better behave to reclaim their love, because I'm going to struggle as a little boy on my own. I can't cope. If a partner withdraws their love or gets cross with me, I'm not going to die. Whereas as a little boy, I probably wouldn't survive. So do you see what I mean? There's a carryover. So first, when something happens, we've got to realize what's its history back that no longer applies. Where we were dependent, we're not now. Or it's a signal something is happening right here, right now, that affects what matters to me. Something precious is under threat, or is being taken, or has been lost. And we're allowed those emotions. So for me, we've got this, why emotional intelligence is so important. There's a whole other subject, but I think people are over-dwelling in their emotions, because emotions are there for us to process what's going on and to ask, is this true? What's linked to the past and what's really happening now? But then we're not meant to stay in those emotions. We're not meant to stay dependent. We are meant to co-create and go, okay, so what do I do to shift that? And that's what, this kind of overindulgence with how I'm feeling, I think is a little dangerous right now. That people get stuck and, well, I'm feeling this, therefore I am stuck. No, you're just having a feeling, learn to process it, and then get yourself to a place, because we can learn to process emotions so we can then reclaim our sovereignty to act. And this is why being able to get back to this place where, actually I am okay. And I am okay enough to move forward. And I'm okay with myself, and I'm okay with the universe. I can start to co-create and take steps forward, and that gives us our sovereignty back. But there's a couple of other things in here. You've implied, we feel like we've got to be here to be happy. Most of us are going, I need these things. I need to be bigger, better, stronger, richer, faster, have more stuff, have achieved the success, and then I'll be happy. And the thing is, when we get there, there's either someone bigger, better, stronger, richer, faster, sexier with more stuff than we have, so we're not there yet, or we're at the top of the game, but we've got to hang on to it. And then we're worried about, how do I stay there? It's like winning the league. Next season, you've got to stay there. The game isn't over. So we're still not happy. And that's the problem. Most of us are living with that condition. When I get there, I can be happy, and it never happens. Because the reality is, happiness can only ever be experienced in this moment now. And we need to learn to be happy with ourselves, whatever's going on, to find the beauty, even in the most awful tragedy of losing a loved one. That there is that little bit of joy and peace or realization. It's where kind of when you realize that nothing's lost, which is a spiritual shift, is trying to find the peace in that, which doesn't mean when you lose someone you love, you shouldn't grieve. But it's that bit that finally, when the time is right, helps us move on. So I don't know if I'm making that clear enough, but we can normally find some peace, even if it's not joy, or some okayness in the worst scenarios that start to let us move forward. But the big shift is, when we're living with the when I get there, I'll be happy, that's a neurosis. That's part of the craziness. Whereas when we can be okay with ourselves right now, what we're left with is choice. Where do I want to go? What's the path that lifts my energy? What's the path that feels right? Not because I have to get there, but because it's the path feels most worthwhile. We talked about Joseph Campbell and follow your bliss. Find where your energy lifts. Find what stirs you. Going over there looks promising. Let's try it. Not because when I get there I'll be happy, because this is a path I want to walk. Let's enjoy the journey.
There's so much to take out of that for me. Someone asked me the other day, actually, if I've mentioned to them about the book I mentioned, Lessons from Listening, and nearly 100 episodes in, I've had some amazing conversations and learnt so much, as we mentioned before, and like an education for me. But if you had to go, right, what are the key things I've learned, and probably how you've just articulated it, is it like one of the reasons it says helping the world to see success differently? Because for me, being where we are right now and being okay with that has got to be what where true joy, fulfillment and happiness lies. Because the amount of people, multi-millionaires who've sat opposite me and have gone, yeah, I'm going to get there, and you get to that point, like you said, and there's not that euphoria moment. We almost promise ourselves, even Olympic champions who've sat here and gone, we feel like we're going to get to this point, we're going to get to the top of the mountain, and there's this euphoria moment, that's it now. But it's not, because ultimately we need a purpose, don't we? We need something. And if there's one thing I can teach my kids, I guess, and there's one thing I'm on a journey to try and be better at myself, is to go, where am I right now, and be in the moment as much as we possibly can.
And back to Joseph Campbell, but I would like just to give a very simple real life example of how this applies, because some of this might be a bit abstract. But with Joseph Campbell, he talks about with the hero's journey, because he came up with that concept that story writers and Hollywood knows the hero's journey, because it's in all the sort of self-development movies. Hero comes good. There's three main stories that tend to get told. The first round is where we realize we are at one with and equal to our parents. It's where we make our own rules. We're not living any longer by our parents' rules. And that's kind of the first level of success. And atonement, is finding peace with. So we find peace with our parents. We're no longer, in awe or fear of them. We can decide if we're okay or not. The second round is where we start to realize we are at one with and equal to society. We are no longer living under society's rules. We feel free to choose for ourselves the rules that we choose to play and live by. And then the third round is the spiritual round, where we realize we are at one with or equal to the force or God or the higher power, whatever you want to think of it as. We are a fractal of that energy. So we are not living under a God that dictates our life. We are there as part of that power, part of that force. So to me, the ultimate journey in life is to be able to connect with that force, which is life-giving energy, that is love, so we can be more loving towards ourselves and more loving to people, because I believe our richest experiences of life are the degree to which we can share love, which ultimately is the degree also to which we can connect with the force and the enormity of the universe and the energy that creates it.
Love that.
But can I just give a very practical little example?
Yeah.
Because it sounds very abstract.
No, it just before you, because I guess one thing, a lot of people will be maybe listening to this, and you go, actually, especially from your background, and you've got the business jet engine. I know about, you've got 17 processes, I guess, in place, and all of them things. I'd be really keen to that. You've got a very logical mind. You mentioned that with the product design, and you obviously the 17 steps will take people on a journey to get to that thing. I am conscious. I'm wondering, from that practical business element that maybe you're tapping into now, how much of your coaching do you bring in what you've just talked about, and that side of it to founders, entrepreneurs, leaders? How much of that is, and how much of the business process is part of your coaching?
Well, they're all interlinked, and ultimately my belief is that it's about life. I don't talk about work-life balance. I more recently believe it's about life balance. Our business should support our life, not the other way around. And the whole point of business, and most of the people I work with, most of them aren't looking for massive scale up. They don't want the investment. They don't want to have to share the ownership with anybody else. Most of them want the independence of a lifestyle where they have autonomy and freedom and a comfortable way of living. So they tend to be the businesses I attract that want to be some under 20 people. And some may then go on. That's great. So yes, we are looking at the whole person, but these are the big systems of life. Most of us are spending time at work. Let's run better businesses with more clarity, because those three things an entrepreneur needs all have an impact, and all are affected by how do we approach it. So I've, from my design background, had an ability to just decode what's going on, to see steps, to break it down, to turn it into logical orders. So I have come up with a system to decode how business works, how leadership works, but how life and relationship works, because all have an impact. So with business, I tend to focus on the business and leadership challenges, but other stuff comes up. The relationship at home, stress. Stress is massive for most business owners. We have been through some of the most difficult times recently. So that's when we venture into this other territory, if appropriate. For many, it's not, but still just that being okay with what's going on, that having that faith that we can sort this out, we can move forward. Whatever comes, it's how we respond. It's kind of like a soup from which we're working. It's a soup we're in. It sets a tone. Let's not panic. It will be okay. Have faith in yourself, in your ability to design and create. But that doesn't mean we sit and pray.
No. I think that's it. Like it's about taking action, isn't it? But I think it's one thing. A thing that I've listened to a few times. People saying, actually, this storm will pass, and that doesn't necessarily always mean a downtime. Also, good times as well. It's sort of almost recognising that wherever you are right now, this period of your life will pass.
It will.
And if it's great and things are all going really well at this moment, brilliant. But recognise and be grateful for where you are right at that point. But recognise that time will pass. And when you're in a really shit place and you're having a really tough time, recognising that also that will pass. And I think, like you said, it's difficult to just sit there and do nothing and go, this will pass, because you've got to sometimes we've got to take action to do them, whether that be asking for help, whether that be just taking, like as you mentioned, that small step in the right direction, where actually finding out where I want to go and taking a small step to get there. Such a key message, isn't it?
It really is, and I like to sort of fairly jokingly say any idiot can be the hero when they're riding the tiger, but the tiger always wants its turn. It's going to be on your back. There will be times when, you know, shit hits the fan. The heavy stuff, you're carrying that tiger. That's when it's tough. That's when it's heavy. It's a heavy load. And for me, that really is what defines a person, not how they're showing up when it's all going well, but when they're really going through the tough times. How do they show up? And sometimes there's what I call a manage and hold. Things are so tough and it's not clear how to move forward. And we have to manage the situation and manage our sanity, manage and hold, until the clarity arrives or our energy returns. But we can't just dwell forever. We have to give ourselves to recoup. Sometimes we just need that time to rest, time to recover, but then regroup. And that's what I'm always looking for, is judging when that moment is right to go, okay, are we regrouped enough to start taking the next positive step? But that's where faith in yourself, faith in your abilities, or faith in something greater plays such a big part in helping us through. Faith that we will get through.
Yeah. And what the importance, and I've heard you talk before as well, and we sort of mentioned the importance, I guess, of famous saying, isn't it? Taking that time out to work on your business instead of in it.
Yeah.
I've heard you mention that a lot, social posts and stuff as well. But it's sometimes, especially solopreneurs, or even if you've got a team around, sometimes it's that difficult position to be in, isn't it? When you're, I've got to be the one out there saying I've got to be doing these things, I've got to be juggling all these things. I haven't got time to take that. But how important is that, to take that step back?
Hugely. And it used to frustrate the heck out of me, people telling me to work smarter, not harder, because I was working as smart as I knew how. And that's part of what my mission, as I'd kind of failed in business with MindZone, and I kind of knew I wanted to work for myself again in the end, deep down, although I thought I possibly wouldn't after that experience. But I knew I needed to figure out how to work smarter. And that's why I have things like the Jet Engine, to help people choose the priorities of what to work on, how to see their business simply and clearly, to go, if I'm going to work smarter and step back, otherwise I'm just going to be a busy fool. How do I choose the 1, 2, or 3 top priorities that will have the big impact? Because otherwise I'm just working really hard, running around, but it could be all the wrong things. And I see it so often. You know, people are really, really busy heading the wrong way, or putting their energy into a marketing plan when they only need 10 clients, but they're trying to have a whole, big social media approach that takes a huge amount of energy, is going out to thousands of people when they need 10 people. There's much simpler ways of finding 10 clients.
It's such I hear you talk like that, and it almost, it's like holding a mirror up sometimes, because you go, I've heard that, because I like, amount of times I'm out and about, and God, you're everywhere. You're doing this, you're doing that, but you do take a step back sometimes, and you go, being busy for the sake of being busy.
Yeah.
And I think I've certainly been guilty of that a lot in the past, especially probably the last couple of years. Like, I've on a podcast called Different Hats because of the amount of different things that I do, and the different personas I feel like I have to be, and I'm trying to be everything to everyone. Naturally, when you take a step back and realise, like you say, maybe focus on some, what am I actually trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. Where am I trying to go? And I think that's such a valuable message for anyone listening. I'd be keen to tap into and get your idea, because like, one of the biggest things, there's a book by Bronnie Ware called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, right? And the biggest figure, she's a palliative nurse. I don't know if you've read it or you heard of it, but she's a palliative nurse, and she spoke to the people who are dying, and the top regret of the dying is I've not lived a life true to myself. So I've not lived an authentic life. Okay? If that's the biggest regret of dying, so I then look at myself and I think, I'm doing these different things, and I love running different businesses. I love spinning different plates, wearing different hats, whatever that looks like. But how we can, I guess, try and be. We've got these different personas that we maybe have. How can you be sure that you're living an authentic life across all of those platforms? What's your take on living an authentic life? How do we, as entrepreneurs, business owners, we have to try and be everything to everyone? What advice do you give to businesses?
Well, I love the Joseph Campbell phrase I mentioned before, follow your bliss. And the more okay we can be with where we are now, because it's when we're chasing dreams that aren't often our own, when we're trying to live up to, daddy's expectation of who I should be, that's when I've got to be this thing. And that's when we get there and go, what was that all about? So the more we are okay with ourselves, all we can do is try and find where's the beam. Imagine an aircraft searching for the auto flight path, and it's looking for where's the radar beam that goes blip. This is where my energy lifts and I feel more alive, because it's that fullness of life, that feeling fully alive. When I'm doing this, I can immerse myself in it for hours. I feel good. Or when I'm with this person, my energy lifts. I feel more alive. I have a richer experience of being alive. That's this life force we are connecting with. That shows us we're on the path, we're on the beam. We may not know where that leads. And we're going to
And that's okay.
And that's okay. And we're going to constantly lose the path because we go down it far enough and find there was a path I should have taken, or maybe shouldn't have taken. Sometimes it's finding the things that haven't worked, finding out the dead ends and being okay. When should I stop? When should I let go of something? Learning to let go in life.
How are you with that? Letting go?
Well, it's painful.
Yeah. Of course.
It's painful with loved ones, with people, with things that you can get over attached to. But in the end, you've got to go, is this serving me? Is this lifting my energy or draining it? And it's even like when you declutter your house. One of the things I do now is I look at some objects or things that I've been very attached to, and I go, actually, when I connect my energy to this, how do I feel? Does it actually make me feel sad? Or does it bring joy and love into my life? Do I feel good with keeping this object or this memory or this thing? And there's things I've looked at and go, actually, I'm holding on to this because there's an attachment, but I don't feel good about this anymore. Time for it to go. Its energy doesn't serve me. It's had its time. And there's things that I have around me now that hopefully most of the things I now have in my life I look at and they feed me, feed my soul in some way because of their beauty or their memory or the form, or just, they've got a soulfulness to them that to me is meaningful. And I think we should be trying to do that with everything we're doing. And if we're working with clients that aren't doing that, if we're creating products or offering a service that no longer we feel good about, maybe it's time to go. What could I let go of? What could I change? How could I refresh this to feed my soul again?
I love that. And I guess if whatever we're doing in life, we constantly bring it back to that. Is this feeding my soul? Is this? I guess people talk about values and stuff. So I find it really fascinating that we, especially as entrepreneurs, or we label ourselves in society. We often label ourselves, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a business owner, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a solicitor, or whatever that is. And then I'm also a father, and I'm these. We are all of those things. Like I say, these different personas that we may have. But actually, something I find really fascinating, I'll get your take on this, is take all of them things out of the equation, just who we are as a person, who's right in here, what are our core values, and then looking at, and that's what defines me, not what business I run, or if I'm a husband or a wife, or whatever those things are, but it's the values. And if you come at all of those aspects of your life, and are they aligned with the values I've got as an individual? that what people should be trying to get to? Is that how we should be looking at things?
I think so. There's a sort of a tongue-in-cheek concept as a designer that I sort of came up with called PDR, post-design rationalization, which is basically when you come up with something and somehow you go, actually that design really works. I haven't a clue how I actually got there, and then you think up all the reasons it's a good design and how you got there. And I think values actually work that way. Sometimes when we just recognize that something feels right, mind, body, emotions, and spirit. Good decisions are always the right ones when it just feels right on all four levels. It's not just all a logical, that makes sense. And I think when we're living a life doing something that feels that way, we can then decode what are the elements of that cause that to be that way. I'm not sure we can actually go, what are my values? Let's put that together and go this way. I think we've got to feel what feels right. Let's decode it. If that kind of makes
really
sense.
So you saying maybe more, how much should we trust our gut more and trust our beliefs more? Is that what you...
More than I think many of us do, and I'm not for a moment saying if your logic is also saying that looks bad, all four have to add up. But I've learned increasingly to trust my intuition. And a simple story was say when I was commuting up to London and working for a leadership coach in London, which is where I sort of morphed from product design and mind zone into what I do now, was working for this top leadership coach, helping research and design his material. So I was commuting up after I'd moved to Bexhill, and I'd already taken 2 clean shirts, and something was going, take a third. And I thought, well, I've already got a spare. And on the train up, I spilled coffee down one of the shirts. And then the one I had packed, where I was staying, I was ironing it in the morning, and the iron splattered gunk all over my shirt. I should have brought the third shirt. It's just a simple example, but increasingly I've learned when I get these niggles, these alarm bells, or maybe I should mention so-and-so, and then I didn't. I should have.
Brilliant.
So, we can very easily logically override a gut feel. And I think we always need to pay attention to mind, body, spirit, emotion. There's information. We are connected to a web. And it all adds together. And we live a richer life the more we come from all four. Because that's what we're made of.
You talked about leadership.
Yeah.
And as a leadership, I listening to you talking the things that we've talked about today, and love and energy and the universe and all of them things. What do you think makes a good leader?
There's lots of definitions, thousands of theories. To me, what's right at the heart of leadership is the ability to take responsibility and ownership. In the hero's journey, it's the shift from dependency to responsibility and ownership is the core journey in all 3 rounds. That's the same with leadership. People have leadership skill, leadership ability to say if something needs doing or fixing, it's down to me either to fix it or take ownership and responsibility for it getting fixed, which may mean orchestrating other people to do it. But it's that if it needs doing, let's take ownership of it. That to me is at the core of leadership. There's then good leadership and bad leadership. There's highly manipulative leadership and there's loving leadership. There's lots of different ways it shows up, and we need to be wise to all. But to me, that's right at the core. Taking ownership and responsibility for outcomes, not being a dependent or a victim.
I love that. And do you think, like, the way of leading more so, things like soft skills and empathy? We talked a lot about love today, and especially in relation to your business and life in general. Do you think have you seen a big shift over the years? I mean, 20 years in leadership coaching, so have you seen a shift in how people lead and where we are now?
Yes, and I think it's only going to continue, and I think it's going to be in business and in leadership. Probably the key element of competitive advantage is the degree to which you can lead with love, or you can serve your clients with love, and you can look after your team, your suppliers, the more we act with love, the bigger the difference. What we've seen is an old leadership style that was command and control and compete in preference to cooperate. We are seeing huge shifts in people leaning to cooperation rather than always competing, and from command and control to sharing, to including, to empowering. You know, and where you want people to have more life, to fully express themselves, you are giving them love. When you get your team to step up, take ownership, take responsibility, to share your power. Typically, when you really care for someone and want the best for them, that creates loyalty and trust, and they want the same back for you. Occasionally, people will stab you in the back, and that's life. But the majority, you will get back in spades, in bucket loads, more than you give. But it's how you give. If it's conditional, that carries risks.
I mentioned to you before we come off air, I listened to a TED Talk recently by a guy, Simon Squibb, who I mentioned to you, and he alludes to it in that sort of way about he's on a mission at the moment with the whole, with his business, and it's got a help bank, and it's give without take. Yeah. And I think that, as you've sort of mentioned there, in any relationship, it is important, I guess, to assess that and look at it, and the fact that we're going into that from a leadership point of view especially, but you're going into something that you're giving something without expectation of anything back.
Yeah.
I
mean, let's be a little bit mature and careful here. When we want people to work for us, it is transactional. There's an exchange. Yeah. You know, I'm giving you money and security as best I can in exchange for you doing certain things. So there is a transaction, but ultimately, you know, if we go to the simplest version of that, if you have the choice of working for someone who cares about you and your future, how are you going to feel compared to working for a boss that doesn't? Or if you are going to get goods and services from a company who just want your money in exchange for the transaction, if a competitor comes along or another business offers you the same transaction, but they really care, who are you going to go with? So firstly, there's that with the competitive advantage, but in terms of the unconditional, the giving without expecting it back, it's just cleaner. It's like love between humans. When you are only loving someone because actually what you really need back is their love, that's when we get into dramas. You know, I've sent you a lovely text message. Where's mine back? You didn't send me one back. I'm now upset with you. That's completely different to I sent you a loving message. Simply, I wanted you to feel loved. I'm okay. I'm okay whether you reply or not. If you reply back with a loving message, it's a bonus. It's a gift. Let me now see the gift I have just been given. Completely different experience. And that's why it's so important to love ourselves first, because we can't give what we don't have. Driving a car with no petrol in, you know. Because what we're going is, I'm driving a car, but I need fuel. Feed me, fill me up.
Yeah. Is it the world that you're describing?
We're a long way off it.
Well, this is, I guess, this is my thing. There's so much. I try not to listen to the news because there's so much negativity and hatred there. Yet, I guess if there's two camps, I'm in your camp. That's where I'd love to. I feel like I come from that place, I guess, in my heart, and there's a world I want to live in, and I want to create, and I want to help create. I want my kids to grow up in. How do we move to a world more like that?
Increasing awareness and enlightenment. You know, our kids are starting where we left off. The generations below are so much more fluent in a lot of these things. Unfortunately, there's two competing forces happening in the world. I think most of us would agree we're accelerating where the few have more and the many have less, which is a complete, you know, abuse of the resources of the planet. and that's the compete, not cooperate. Let's win by dominance. But equally, I think society, humans are becoming more aware, more enlightened, in a way they've never been. It's which will win. And all we can do is just like there are two forces in the world. There's the life energy and there's the death energy, the yin yang.
Yeah.
But overall, there's a horror and a miracle. Everything is either growing or creating life, or it's feeding, destroying, killing life. But we have the miracle because actually life exists. I think increasingly that human nature craves love. This is the one that's going to win, because increasingly people will find simply winning at everybody else's expense destroys everything that we all want. But there are a minority so disconnected from that. Conquest is the only way, taking more than they can possibly use.
Where does AI come into this world that we're both talking about?
I do not know. It can go. Everything's a paradox. It can go either way. Personally, I have my concerns around it, but I'm not a futurist. I wish I was. I'm not really going to share my philosophy on that because I'm not hugely competent to say. I hope it's for the best, but I do have concerns hugely. I've read Asimov. I've seen iRobot.
But I guess, and I've talked to some experts on AI on here, and I think from the world that you're talking about, what we've spoke about mainly today, I think that will always be the most profound thing, and AI will come in, and if it's utilised as just a tool, which it is a tool, to enhance certain aspects of our business from a logical point of view, from a product design, it's just another product that we can utilise for good, hopefully. But it's never ever going to replace, I don't think, because it hasn't got a soul, and it can't give and receive love as we're talking about today with that, and not just love in that one sense of form, but in the greater universe with the energy that you've talked about. And that, my opinion on that is that it's never going to be able to replace that.
I would hope so. And we've all seen, I presume, the sci-fi movies like Terminator, like iRobot, even Star Wars. Darth Vader, the Black Star, they are the machine empire. The whoever Luke Skywalker's lot were, I can't remember now, the rebellion, they are the people with soul. That's what we always see in these movies, isn't it? Is that competition. What we are unleashing, I believe, we've had many technological advances like the Industrial Revolution. We've had things that have come in over time that have transformed the world as we know it. My understanding is we're creating something that can make decisions of its own. Everything else we've created, in the end, it's how we abuse it. This is a different beast, and that's where I think there are risks, but I have no idea how that will unfold.
Yeah, sure. Martin, look, we're coming towards the end. It's been the beautiful conversation that I knew it would be, and I've loved listening to how you've described things, and I think that I certainly align so much with your thought process and your ethos and your message. Just as we cover the last couple of bits, firstly, the essence of the podcast, right? Helping the world to see success differently. Define success to me in your eyes. How do you define it?
It's our ability to be in relationship and share love with ourselves, with others around us, with the natural world, the world we have, and in the end, the force. That to me is ultimately when we most experience success, that feeling of being fully alive to the world we're in. Everything else is a game of Monopoly. And it's a game we need to play. We're in a capitalist society. It's good to be good at playing a game and win at it, not lose at it, because it gives us further choices but it's not the real game. Because if we've never been present ever to one moment in life or another person or to nature, we'll get to the end of life and go, the real game's over there. Can I have another go? Too late.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, a brilliant definition. And like, and it's such a thing, because as business owners, life, society, there's that constant bombardment of need, want more, need to keep striving, get on that treadmill, and we keep going and we keep going, we keep going. And we sort of alluded to it, I guess, a little bit earlier about, you know, when times are tough, especially from a business point of view financially, that's that hole sometimes. It's the financial things that keep us up at night and keep us, you know, I haven't got enough robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you're struggling here and you're struggling there and you're trying to get yourself out of it. You've been there, you mentioned those tough times. When you're in then trying to, if we can try and look at the world and remind ourselves of how you've just described it, that is the true, that's what's going to help us get out of those holes, right?
Yeah.
Of course, taking small steps and all them other bits, but ultimately, the reason that we're here is to love and be loved.
Yeah.
Surround ourselves with, but because the reason I defined it, I've started this mission, I guess, to try and define what success is and try and change that narrative around what success is because, as I mentioned to you, though, I'm sure that day when we were speaking to the Grand, that like, for me, it was money and that was going to be my goal. And when I didn't get there, I was like, oh, shit. And then actually looking at it and going, I'm surrounded by people who love me.
Yeah.
Wow, if my measurement of success is based on that, you know what I'm doing? I'm doing very well.
And your ability to allow yourself to be loved.
Yeah.
You know, I never used to be able to take a compliment very well. I would brush it aside. No, it wasn't much. I couldn't let it in.
See, I still struggle with that. What tools would you give me to get? Because I really struggle with that. But anytime someone gets, no.
My parents were classical musicians. My mum and my stepdad, and I grew up playing the cello and the bass. And I was playing in an orchestra as a sort of young bachelor. And a dear friend of mine who was a psychologist came to the performance. And afterwards, he came out. I was at the back door, and he said, "Martin, you played fantastically." And I was like, "Oh no." He said, "Hang on. Imagine I'm a small child, and I've just tried to give you a flower as a gift. What you've done is brushed it aside and stamped on it." He said, "I want to thank you for the gift you gave me in that concert. Please accept what I've just told you and let it in." He said, "Please look me in the eye, let me say it again, and just let it in." So now what I've realized is actually I'm denying someone give me a gift when they give me a compliment. And I've become much better. Not always. I still get it at times. Like, oh God, I've just cast one aside. Of just going, let's soak that up. This is a treat. Someone is giving me some praise or a compliment. Let me just let it in and let them give me a gift.
Brilliant. That's a brilliant way of looking at it. I love that.
Fabulous gift he gave me by pulling me up on that.
Yeah.
Very grateful to him still.
I'm going to just finish off with one thing I'd just like you to leave us with. We use conversation cards in a lot of our events that we do, our top table events. One of the questions that come up recently, I've asked a few people and I find this fascinating. If you could, you're on your deathbed, there's one lesson you can leave to the world, what would it be?
Learn to accept yourself with love. You're good, you're bad, you're beautiful, you're ugly. It's all okay.
Oh, brilliant way to finish. Mate, honestly, thank you so much for your time. It's I can't wait to go back and listen to the episode actually, and there's so much so much to take away from it, and so many amazing messages that will come out of it, I'm sure. And I'm sure listeners, I hope they've got as much from it as I have. So, mate, really grateful for your time. Thank you. It's been amazing.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And that, as they say, is a wrap.